Okay. Oh, hold on a second. First of all, my office is a mess. This is terrible. Who's calling here right now? Bye-bye. Already gone. Wrong phone. Bye. All right, so now we're back. See what's going on here? Go ahead now. Oh. So, what we are talking about today here is it Temnee, right?
Yes.
Are you taking the puppy? All right, here we go. Puppy, go bye-bye. Here's the puppy. Say bye. Say hi to Temnee. Bye.
Oh.
Mama, we're going to the vet. There you go.
Oh.
All right, later. So what we're talking about is case study 5, and then in combination with that, also the quiz 5, question 6.
Right.
So since it refers to the case study 5, let's look at the case study 5 first. So what we see here on our other screen is basically case study 5, killing in action. And in that case study, we are told that the film we're producing has a budget of $15 million. And our sales agent will put together a sales estimate sheet, which we know is the sheet where basically the sales agent tells us what they think they can do and what they believe each of these countries would pay as a license fee. Mm-hmm. That's basically what the sales estimates are. So they are nothing else but a projection sheet that, oh my God, my hair looks so terrible. Anyway, it is what it is. A projection sheet. I should put that on. I should put like a little hood on. That's good. A projection sheet that basically lets us know this is the value of a movie. So it says, here are all these countries, and here are the license fees that we believe you can get out of these countries. That's what a sales estimate sheet is. So we haven't really done any sales at this point. So here's what that looks like. When you scroll down a little with me here, you see the sales estimates show us 2 columns, an ask column, which is the question where the sales agent says to the distributor, this is how much I want. I want you, Australia, to pay me $675,000 for the right to release this film in the first run circle, which could be anywhere from 3 to 15 years. And I need you to pay me $675,000 for that as a license fee. Okay. Now, in the other situation, we have a take number here, which is $450,000. That is the lowest number that the sales agent will accept and that you will accept as the producer and that the bank will assume is the worst case scenario. That is why it's important that the sales estimates always have 2 columns. In reality, the pricing is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. So when you go out and sell the movie, it's probably going to be somewhere between $675 and $450, $675. It's probably going to be around like $500 or $550, somewhere in the middle. That's usually what happens. When the movie is really good and it's really in demand, then you can very often get the $675. But in many cases, in reality, you see that when you go out and do your movies, you'll see it's probably somewhere in the middle. So this sales estimate sheet is nothing but a first financial paper that you will get from the sales agent to tell you, where am I with my movie? What is it actually worth? And how much money can I make with it when I sell the distribution rights throughout the world? By the way, that's my other dog that's making all the noise. I apologize.
I figured. It sounds like my dog.
This is a 14-year-old lab pit shepherd mix. And he has arthritis, and it's the worst. Poor guy.
Aww.
All right, yeah. So once we have the sales estimate, the next thing that happens is the sales agent then goes and says, okay, I have these estimates. I'm now going to start doing pre-sales. Pre-sales, as you know, are nothing other than sales of distribution rights that happen before you make your movie versus sales that happen after you make the movie. It's the only difference. So it doesn't really matter when this happens. In our case, it happens before, so pre-sales, which is good. So we can use these pre-sale contracts, these distribution contracts, to take them to our bank, and then the bank will give us money for them. They will cash flow these contracts. So when I take, like here, for example, we now pre-sold Australia for $450,000, the bank will look at that Australia contract and will say, you know what, $450,000 from Australia. We like the Australian distributor. We'll give you 80% of that. Yes, perfect. Remember that when you get these contracts, 20% is usually a down payment that is being given to you at the time you do the contract. So 20% of the $450 you will be receiving when they sign the deal. And that money sits with the sales agent waiting for you to receive when you have all the other monies together. And the reason why it sits with the sales agent first is, let's say you start these pre-sales, but you never actually make the movie. Happens all the time. Then that money will be released back to the distributors. So they will hold it for a certain period of time during which you can put the movie together. But if you don't put the movie together, let's say for a year, the money goes back. And that's just how you have to remember it. So you get 20% of this 450 upfront given to you, and then the balance is going to be cash flowed by the bank. What the bank does, and I want you to remember this too, depending on who the buyer is, who the distributor is, and what the country is that is buying, they will apply discounting. So when the buyer is a buyer, for example, that they know hasn't paid on time or always pays late or pays not at all, the banks know all these distributors, so they know all these buyers. They might say, you know what, when you sell to this little screwy person over there in Australia, we've dealt with the Australian buyer, even though Australia is a great country and we like them as a strong, economically strong country. The buyer that you chose, this distributor, we have had issues with. We had to chase our money, and the bank will know that. And they might just say, we'll only give you 50% of what that contract is worth. So there will be discounts applied with every contract, depending on the level and the bankability of the distributor and or the territory. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's important for you to know when we look at these pre-sales here. So in this case, when we go down, we look at, okay, how does this project look like? What is going on with this project? In our case, we are assuming that the budget that we are doing this movie for, which is $15 million, will be reflected and covered by 75% of distribution rights when they're sold internationally. That's where the 11,250,000 coming from. That's basically 75% of 15 million. It's also what shows up here in the sales estimates. So when you look up here, this number is going to be this number because it's similar to that. I think it is here, 11,250. Let me see if that's actually correct or not. It's not correct. How's that? Oh, we just went by 75%.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did, we basically decided we are taking the take estimate at 75% of the budget. So we decided we're going to make 11,250,000. The estimates that we got from the sales agents are slightly below that. It's not a big deal. But in our case, we just want to know, what is our minimum? Our minimum is 75% of the budget, which is 11,250,000. Now the pre-sales that we have gotten altogether, when you go up here, all these pre-sales that we have received and that the sales agent made are 5,295,000. So we're putting them down here and say, okay, we have pre-sales of 5,295,000. And the unsold rights are basically the rights that we haven't sold, which is nothing else but your entire sales estimates minus what you have sold leaves you with what you haven't sold. And that number that you haven't sold is the unsold rights. And in our case, it's 5,955,000. In the assumption, we're assuming that our US distribution revenues are $5 million. So altogether, we're making 16,250,000 in this case. Now, when we go to our, I'm going to go to our, let's go here. You see the same applicable here. We have 75%, 11,250,000 assumed, right? Because nothing changes there in our question 6 for quiz 5. And the pre-sales are still the same. But this number, the 5,955,000, which is the take number, is going to change to, and I can tell you what, it's going to change to this number. And the reason why it does that is because we are now assuming that we're selling the unsold rights at the take price. So let's go back to our sales estimates so you understand what that means. Hold on, let's go back here. A moment. So what we do here is, why did I just put this? Hold on a second. All these things, I need to go up here. Hold on, let me go out. Yes, let me just get out of these. Okay, so here we are. Oh, that's yours. No, that's not yours. Let me just go away here. Too much. Where's my screen? Where is my screen? Oh, there it is. Down there it is. Okay, let's go up here. It's not moving up. Hold on. Come up. Okay, let me go up. Okay, so when we go back up here and we look at what is our ask unsold rights, you see how these rights that we have sold here, you see we sold Australia, we sold Benelux, we sold France. You see how there's all zeros in the ask? You see that? And the reason why it's zero is because you don't have those available anymore to sell. They're gone. You already sold them with your pre-sales. So I have to zero them out. I have to make them a zero because they're simply no longer there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when I sell Brazil, I'm at zero. When I sell CIS Baltics, I'm at zero. So when I take all these territories out that I have sold, even if I sold them at the take level, it doesn't matter at what price level I'm selling them. The fact is, I don't have these rights anymore. They're not available. In order for me to figure out what is still available, I have to take them out. So that's all I did. I took them out. I zeroed them out here in the sales sheet. So now what I'm left with is 8,988,750 in unsold rights in my ask column. So all I did is I removed what I've sold. Let's go back to this one here. And I put in what I have left, which is exactly, see, 8,988,750, 8,988,750. That's the only change I made because nothing has changed. All I'm doing is I know what I should be getting per my international sales estimates. I know what I've sold. I already sold $5,295,000 worth of rights. Now, if I get to sell the rest at the ask level, what does it look like? This is what it looks like. I'm putting it in here. So I'm getting to sell all the rights I haven't sold yet at the ask level. This should actually be ask. I'm going to put that in here, ask. So when I then go down and figure out what else has changed, I'm going to look at my bank loan for my pre-sales. The pre-sales haven't changed. That's why the pre-sale bank loan is also not changing in this structure because it's the same pre-sales. We sold them at the take pricing. Nothing has changed. So we leave it as it is. But when we go to the gap loan, there we look at the unsold rights because the gap loan, that collateral is your unsold rights. So the bank will look at what do you have available here? What's going on there? So when we are assuming the ask to be applicable, then we have to put that in here. So all I did is I put the ask price in here, but then I realized if I divide the ask by half, I'm above my cap and the bank will never give me more than 20% of my budget. 20% of 15 million is 3 million. That's why I put the 3 million here. So no matter, we could have $20 million sitting here in unsold rights. We would still only get $3 million of a gap loan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's why a lot of you guys made a mistake because obviously, well, it's unsold rights. I have to do 50%. Yes. No, yes. Because you have to remember the cap is always 20% of your budget. So no matter how much you think you have to sell, no matter how much money you think you'll be making, the bank will be rigid and say, I'm not giving you more than 20% as a gap loan. So go home with that. So that's why we put the 3 million in here. And that's why we're only charging the interest on the 3 million. So this number will change slightly to the number we had before. So when we look here, our bank loan is 5,748,150. When we look at our original, the bank loan was 5,700,000. See, it's not that much difference. Really, basically $50,000. That's all there is. It's not much more because the cap applies. And the only other place where you see a difference is the equity, because the equity, when you go, everything else is the same. We have our bank loan, pre-sales and gap. We have the, hold on, let me go up a little bit. We have the junior loan, the mezzanine loan was basically just 10% of your budget, hasn't changed, still 10% of your budget. We have the production incentive, hasn't changed because you're still producing the movie in a tax incentivized region for $15 million. Nothing changed there. The equity has changed because the bank amount is different. The loan is a little higher, which reduces your equity a little bit because you need less equity now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our equity changed now to 3,794,000. Slightly changed, but it did change. So when we go down and do our recoupment, we now deal with what do we get and what do we need to pay. So we got our 5 million from the US. We got our 5,295,000 from pre-sales. We got our 8,988,000 from our unsold rights, because that's how we're selling them now. And we are deducting the down payment that we already received, which in this case would be 1,059,000, which is the down payment just for the pre-sales. It's the same amount in the case study. It hasn't changed because the down payment is only paid for the pre-sales, nothing else, right? So we have a little bit more money in the worldwide gross revenues here. And then we're paying everyone back. We pay the collection agent 1%. We pay our sales agent 16% for all the international rights. And we're giving them 5% when he sells the domestic rights. So that's the fees that they get. We pay the bank loan back. We pay the bank loan back, including the interest that we have to pay. We had in the last session, and I don't know if you were there, I think it was Joyce saying, why are we paying the interest twice? And I explained to Joyce, you're not actually paying the interest when you get your loan. The interest is just set aside by the bank, but no one pays it. You're not issuing a check for, what is the interest? I forgot, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're not actually giving the bank money. The bank is going to want their interest. So they're going to charge it to you when you pay the bank loan back, which is at this moment here in recoupment. And then you pay your junior loan back with the 10%. You pay your equity back with the 20% premium that you're paying. And if you pay all these people back, you're left with these net profits. It's basically revenues minus expenses gets you to the net profits. And then you figure out who is my net profit participant. Obviously my equity provider, and it says in this case study, they want 20%. So we're giving them 20%. And then your cast and director wanted 40%. And the rest is all yours, which is why the producer is getting 1,318,317.80. Now, I just want to remind you, the only difference you're doing for this question is you're considering that you're selling the rights that you can still sell at a higher price. That's the only thing you changed for your case study.
Okay.
Does that sink in?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any other question that you had for anything else?
No, I think this was the main one that I had trouble with. So I think I'm okay.
Yeah, you sure? I mean,
Yeah.
we're here, we can do it. If you have anything else, let me know. The main thing to remember is that when you do the sales estimates with your sales agent and then the actual pre-sales, these are two different things. One is basically just a projection that will become reality when your recoupment schedule starts. And the other one is what happens during your funding period, where you try to get all your money together. You're trying to get these pre-sales done, you're trying to get them to the bank, and then you get a bank loan. You're trying to get your equity, you're trying to figure out how much incentive can I get from an incentive lender, depending on where I'm shooting. So the funding is all about how am I getting this money together, where can I get it, and what do I need to do? And then the recoupment is about, I'm assuming all of this is going to happen the way I'm planning it to happen.
Right.
And that's why the recoupment is kind of its own universe, where you say, I'm planning this is going to happen, and this is how much money I'm going to be making, and this is who I'm going to be paying if these are the people that actually will give me the money the way I think I should be getting it. So it's really, when you put a business plan together, you're projecting the entire life circle of your movie. And that is all you can do. You can only do a projection based on industry standards, based on what you think is going to happen, and based on what you believe is going to happen, subject to the value of your movie. But you can only put it together in a way that you think is going to become a reality. What the reality later is, no one knows. But it will likely be something close, depending on what your financial elements then end up being. If you have more equity and less pre-sales, then obviously you have a lower bank loan and you pay a higher equity premium. So these things will shift slightly depending on where your money will come on in the end. But it is a good start for you to put this together in a business plan to show, I thought about this case from A to Z, and I've talked to my sales agent about it, and I believe this to be happening. Now, for example, if you start early on and you don't have a sales agent yet, and you have no cast, you have nothing, you basically have a script and you're thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? Well, how is this going to work? You do exactly this. You put a finance plan together, assuming that this is what the sales agent is going to tell you. You are assuming that your sales estimates will be a version of this, where you have 75% covered through international rights at the minimum. And when you go to your your ask numbers, you add anywhere between 25 and 50% to your take. and make that your ask column. This is how you put the numbers together yourself. So when you talk to investors, you can say to them, this is what the industry standard is. This is what I believe I can do. And if you give me some equity money, I can follow up with all these steps. And if something changes, then you equity investor have a right to approve it. So if, for example, the sales agent later comes back to you and says, well, in your mind, the sales estimates were 75%. I don't see that. I'm only seeing this movie returning 50%. So now the conversation is, how do I elevate my numbers to hit my 75%? And is that going to be a thing where, do I have to reduce my budget or do I have to change my package? It's one of the two.
Right.
So either or, you can discuss with your investor, numbers coming back at 50% instead of 75. Here are our options. We can change the script a little bit. We can reduce the budget, or I can go for higher cast level if you back my offers. So I can have, instead of, I don't know, Joe Schmo, Jason Statham. I always mention that name because the first one comes into mind. But point is, that's a conversation you can have with your equity investor. And when you do a deal with them, you say, this is the plan that we're going by with these actors that I'm envisioning and this director that I'm envisioning. And based on this package, I think I can reach these numbers. Now, if the sales agent tells us this package is not sufficient, then you and I, investor, will talk about what we need to change to make it sufficient, to make it this. And that's something where your investor is going to have approval over you changing the budget or you changing the cast. But even if you've never spoken to anyone, this is what you do in order to put a business plan together for your project. And this is what you're going to go take shopping. And then you can, talk to investors first, because you're going to have to start somewhere. And the ideal situation is always to start with an investor and having a business plan that they can relate to, that you can walk them through and can say, here is how I got to these numbers, and here is the financial elements I believe I can secure. And under these circumstances, I would like you to invest X. And if you invest this amount, this is what you can make. So a mini business plan is always how you start with anything you do, assuming no matter what you do, this is going to be applicable.
Right.
Yeah. So even if you're like totally out of you're like, I haven't talked to a sales agent, I haven't spoken to anyone that knows anything, I have no idea what I'm doing. Even then, this is what you're doing. And then you get reactions from people, because people will see that you thought this through. A sales agent then will say, you're close, but not quite. So here's what we can do. And then you adjust it. But you need to start somewhere. And this is where you start. So when you work on even a small film, assume this to be the case, as long as it's a commercial film that you're planning on, selling all around the world. It doesn't have to be theatrically released. Can be a smaller film that you don't think you're going to be releasing. In which case, you just want to make sure that the budget is accordingly. Don't make a big budget movie if you don't think the release it's going to be released. So with a movie that is not theatrically released, the budget's usually a little lower. And if it's a movie where you think it can be theatrically released, then you can up the budget. Right? So I think that is kind of the basis for this. All the case studies that you will be working on are versions of this. They will have extra things like interest is being deducted, of course, fees are being applied, of course, box office bonuses and box office revenues will come in. And how do they work? And how do we follow the recoupment chain when we have box office revenues? It's a little bit of a different recoupment structure, and you'll learn about that. And it'll be another step from this. But as long as you have this in mind, and as long as you understand what we did here, and just remember that everything you do in the sales world can be translated to a bank loan in some form. And if you know what the rules and the regulations are, how that is translated, that's all you need to know for the banking. The rest is basically dictated, because the equity investment is dictated whatever you have left. And all the other items, like the mezzanine loan or the incentive, are usually dictated. The mezzanine lender will come to you and say, like your movie, but I'm not giving you more than X. Mm-hmm. People will, say, I'm not comfortable, I'll just give you $500,000 or whatnot. So they'll tell you. Incentive loan is basically provided to you because it depends on where you shoot and what cost they will allow you to get an incentive for. So it's not really up to you. It's basically them telling you, this is how much we think we can give you if you shoot here. And then the tax incentive lender will cash flow this to you based on that assumption and will charge you a fee for it. So those other items are easier to deal with because they're basically dictated to you. They're told to you if you have these conversations. The equity is the only one where you start early on, and the bank is the only one that's regulated. Those two. And then of course, if you have, branding, it kind of it has to do with what content you have, if it kind of combines with the brand, or if you have crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, if you feel that that's something that you want to try, that's not a bad thing to do. But all these things are great because they're just a number that you plug into your finance plan based on your negotiations, your own negotiations with whoever you think makes sense to become a partner for your project. And some, it's $50, others $100. It really depends on how they see themselves in the partnership with you and your project. So, but also that is something that you only control through the negotiations you make. It's not something where you have to figure something out. It's a number that in the end will be plugged into this finance plan.
Right.
And the music investment is something where when you talk to these music investment companies like Cutting Edge, or what's the other one, Atlantis, there are a few, they will have a conversation with you about how much music do you think you're going to be scoring for this movie, and who is the sales agent, and how are they going to sell it, because the music investor makes money from the royalties throughout the world, and they very much relate to how much music is in the movie and where it's being sold. So that conversation is about who's your sales agent, how do they think they're going to sell it, do you have any pre-sales, and how much scoring can we do? And based on that feedback, they'll tell you what they're willing to give you. So that too is a number that is likely going to be given to you. You can negotiate it a little bit, but the room is really limited because the parameters for them to fund against a certain collateral are limited, because they can only fund against a certain amount of scoring and a certain amount of original music distributed in a certain amount of countries that you show them how you're going to be distributing. So that will happen later when you have a sales agent. That's not something you will deal with early on. And to me, the music investment is always something that you can do when you see, oh, I'm missing a little money. Maybe I can figure this one out. Maybe I can try this and see if that works. So it's not an urgent thing that you would start right in the beginning.
Okay, so you can determine it when you're already kind of further along.
Yes, and it's also something that they would probably want to talk to a director about. What kind of music are you envisioning? Do you want to license certain songs? What are you thinking of using? Who do you think you want to use for a composer? Those things are usually also discussed with the director. And they want to know what the director has in mind. And if the director wants, someone very expensive, they might say, yeah, we're not going to pay all of this. We might just pay part of this. So it really is a later conversation that you don't have to worry about. But it is important for you to know you have the option. This is a funding source for you to be tapping into. And the idea here is for me to share with you all the various funding sources that exist right now in the marketplace that you couldn't get your hands on. So it's just important to know, what can I get and why can I get it and how can I get it? That's the whole idea, right? But how you deal with them and how you plug them into your finance plan is also important if and when you get them. And whatever you don't get, like when you have no junior loan or your pre-sales are low, it's going to be covered by your equity component in a very likely place. So that's why the equity is the only thing that kind of goes up or down depending on what you actually need.
Right.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to see if I can throw something else at you to make sure that you got this. Did you look at the case study I started doing in the class but then didn't do?
I thought it was in a separate video. I thought I did watch it.
It was on a separate video, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I did look at that one.
Okay. Did you have any questions about that, or was I clear?
You were. I mean, I think where I got confused was just with the take and the ask, that aspect, and then with the loan. the cap part, I kind of didn't remember that from previous classes, I think.
Don't even be, I have to tell you, I would say 95% of course participants in all the 3 courses that I have right now forget that there is a cap. They're always, it's like, goes right over the head. And I cannot tell you how many times I say this in the live classes. Remember, the bank will never give you more than 20% of your budget. It's like, yeah, whatever, Jeanette, you say so, but we're conveniently forgetting that part.
Exactly.
So, because we want all the money from the bank. So it's a mistake that is always made. Always, always, always. So that's why I'm so glad you are asking. And trust me, you are one of many, 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 many that have the same little forgetting factor in thinking and forgetting that, you know what, I might get all this money. Hold on, here it was here. I might get all this money, the 8,988,000, but I'm really only getting, because if you look at this and if you divide it by half, it's nearly $4.5 million that you would be getting, right? Of course it throws you off. It's like, hold on a second, I should be getting much more. Why am I only, makes no sense. So exactly. That's why just remember this. And in many cases, to be honest with you, in reality, the banks nowadays, they will likely be between 10 and 15 because they're so careful right now with what's going on in the marketplace. So the gap loan is something that they're really, really, really looking very closely at and saying, who is this agent? Who is the sales agent? What are these numbers? And are the pre-sales coming in at the right level that support these numbers? So the banks are very weary about how much they give you for the gap. You know, it's just something to remember. The 20% here that I'm telling you as a cap is generous. In many cases, you will see that you might just get 10, no matter how many rights you still have to sell.
Wow.
But it's better than 10 than nothing, right? 10% is 10% you don't have to ask your equity investor for. So we'll take it. We'll take that too. So, but the reality,
the equity investors, more cautious now too, or?
Well, the equity investor, for them, see, if the bank will only give you 10%, right? The equity investor will then increase their investment. And the reason why it's actually not riskier for them is because you have to think about it this way. If the bank recoups in front of them with their 20% gap loan, right? The equity investor doesn't get any money until the bank has recouped. So they're waiting and waiting and waiting until the bank has recouped. Now, if the bank amount that you have to recoup is less, the equity investor gets to recoup earlier.
Okay.
So in that case, the risk there's not more risk. In fact, the equity investor makes more money because he can give you that 10% extra now that the bank didn't give you, and he can charge you for it, 20% premium. So he is actually very often perfectly fine if you don't get a gap loan at all. Because if they want to make money, they say, we'll take the position of the bank. They know that this gap position that the bank is taking is very low risk, and they're very happy to take it. So that's why if you go and say, I want my equity investor to give me 50% of my budget, if you don't have a gap loan, that's a perfectly fine thing to do. Perfectly fine. The only reason why I always say not ideal for you is because now you're paying 20% of a 20% investment that you could have gotten from the bank, where you just would have paid an interest of maybe 5% or 10, whatever it is. Definitely not 20. So the equity money is going to be more expensive for you. But for the equity investor, it's not an issue. They would usually be happy to give it to you. So, and if you have an equity investor that comes to you and says, you know what, I like your finance plan, but I really don't want the bank to give you that 20% gap. Can we take that out? I want to give you that money. Just say yes. Just take it, because it's less headache for you.
Okay.
Then I would just do the pre-sales, as many as you can, and take the pre-sales to the bank and be done with. And try to somehow, get at least 30% pre-sales so you can keep your equity investor safe by signaling to him and to you that you have a product that actually has some demand, there is some demand for it in the marketplace. And because you're having a third of the budget being pre-sold, that signals to you that people actually like this, that there is a demand. You have to get nervous when you don't get any pre-sales. When no one's biting, no one's interested in pre-buying, that is usually a bad sign. It's usually a sign that the market does not really want that product right now, or that you need to make it more interesting. Either or, it's not a product the market wants.
Okay.
And that's why I like pre-sales, because they give me kind of a check and balance. I tend to fall in love with projects a lot, and then the reality happens and I can't get the pre-sales done. I'm like, what was I thinking? So it happens to the best of us, because when we see a great story as a producer, or when we are a writer and we create something that we think is the next thing after sliced bread, we're not neutral. We're not, when there is no, we're in love with our project. Obviously, we think it's the best thing. So it is important for any one of us, experienced or not experienced, to have the market give us some feedback, and not our relatives or our friends, because they always say, such a great idea, we love it. And even the agents are going to be like, this is so great, can't believe any of this. The market will tell you if your project has legs or not. And sometimes it's really just that the market says, we can't deal with this right now. This is not the right time. It also happens. You heard about these stories. Forrest Gump took 9 years to get made.
Right.
It wasn't the right time when they started out. You have that. It happens all the time, where people, they work on these projects and they're just kind of ahead of their time. So they just have to shelve it for a little bit and not forget about it, and just kind of resurface it later, update it a little, and try it again. I would never give up on a project that you think has legs, that you are very excited about, because it can just very well be that it's just not the right time.
Right.
So just keep that in mind with whatever you're working on.
Yeah, I'm actually an attorney, so I'm on the kind of different side, but I think these are good to know for clients and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, as an attorney, it is important for you to know, obviously, all the things that we're learning about later when it comes to the agreement component. I think you can help your clients a lot by protecting them through certain, I should say, clauses that I throw at you in this course, just out of experience, that I think are very helpful to protect the producer and the investor.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot already. So
All right.
thank you so much. This is like a really great in-depth class.
Oh, I'm glad. Okay. Well, if you have any more questions,
No, I think that's it.
Yeah, good.
Mhm.
Well
Thank
then,
you.
if there's anything that pops up that you want to talk about, please don't hesitate to email me. And then if it's okay with you, I'm going to share this video only with the people that have questions about Quiz5
Yeah,
questions.
that's fine.
Yeah, is that okay?
Mhm.
No, let's